cancer would be the hardest battle of my life, but nothing prepared me for the betrayal that came while I was fighting for my life. As I lost my hair and strength, my husband found comfort in someone else's arms. This isn't just a story about illness or infidelity. It's about surviving when your heart breaks at the same time as your body. Part 1. The diagnosis that changed everything. It started with a sharp pain in my side. Nothing alarming at first, just one of those random twinges you chalk up to stress or bad posture, but it lingered. Then it grew, and before long, I found myself in a hospital gown, lying under harsh fluorescent lights, waiting for words no one ever wants to hear. Stage 2 lymphoma. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I was 34, healthy, active, married. This wasn't supposed to happen to people like me, but cancer doesn't discriminate, and it doesn't wait for the perfect time. It crashes into your life like a thief, robbing you of normalcy, energy, and hair, all in one cruel sweep. Adam, my husband, was there when the doctor said the words. He held my hand, his face unreadable. I remember squeezing his fingers, trying to borrow strength from them. He kissed my forehead, whispered, "We'll get through this." And I believed him. I wanted to believe him. After all, if love meant anything, it had to mean staying when things got hard. Chemotherapy began 2 weeks later. The first round knocked me flat. I threw up for hours. My hair started to come out in handfuls. I cried in the shower the morning I decided to shave it all off. Adam held the clippers. His hands shook the whole time, but he didn't say a word. Afterward, I sat on the bathroom floor, bald and broken, and he pulled me into his lap and told me I was beautiful. That was the moment I told myself, we'll be okay. He loves me. This is just temporary. But temporary can be the gateway to forever if you're not paying attention. I started noticing changes during my second month of treatment. Adam grew distant, less talkative. He spent more time at work, and when he was home, his phone never left his side. I chalked it up to stress. I was the sick one after all. Maybe this was how he was coping. One night I woke up around 2 a.m. to an empty bed. I wandered into the living room and found him on the couch, phone in hand, a guilty look flashing across his face when he noticed me. He mumbled something about couldn't sleep and turned off the screen before I could see it. I didn't press. I was too exhausted, too emotionally drained to pick a fight I wasn't ready to finish. Weeks passed, the distance grew. I told myself he was just tired, that watching the person you love wither and weaken every day does something to a man. I told myself love doesn't vanish that easily, but it does. And sometimes it never existed the way you thought it did. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I'd just returned from a brutal chemo session. I was weak, pale, and cold to my bones. I dragged myself to the laundry room needing something, anything, to distract me. That's when I found it. His shirt, lipstick on the collar, not my shade, not even close. My stomach dropped. I stared at it for minutes, my body frozen, the room spinning. The evidence was there, in bright, unmistakable red. He came home that evening acting like everything was normal. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I was still gathering the pieces of my heart that had started to splinter. I watched him eat dinner, watched him scroll through his phone while I sat beside him, invisible, sick, and alone. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering if it was the illness that made him stop loving me, or if he never really did. Part 2. Confronting the truth. The next morning, I folded the shirt neatly and placed it on our bed. The lipstick stain stared back at me like a wound. I wasn't sure what I expected from him. An apology, a lie, maybe even denial. But I was done pretending, done excusing, done hurting in silence. When Adam walked into the room and saw the shirt, he froze. "I did the laundry," I said, my voice hollow. "This one stood out." He didn't speak, just stood there, blinking like he was trying to wake from a bad dream. But I wasn't going to save him. I wasn't going to smooth this over. "Who is she?" I asked quietly. He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally said, "It's not what you think." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Really? Because what I think is that while I've been fighting for my life, you've been sleeping with someone else." He looked away. The silence confirmed what I already knew. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my body too tired for anger. "How long?" "A few months," he whispered. I nodded slowly. "Since chemo started?" He hesitated. "Around then." It was like being hit by a car you saw coming but couldn't move away from. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold in the pieces that wanted to fall apart. "Why?" I whispered. His voice cracked. I don't know. I was scared. I felt helpless watching you suffer, and she made me feel in control. Like I mattered. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I once trusted more than anyone. The man I imagined growing old with. He looked small, ashamed. But that didn't undo what he had done. You mattered to me, I said. Even when I had nothing left, I still chose you. He sat on the floor, head in his hands, crying. But I didn't comfort him. For once, I let him sit with the pain he created. The days that followed were a blur of silence and small talks about groceries and medications, all while a storm brewed beneath our skin. I didn't know what to do. My body was healing barely, but my heart, it was shredded. And the worst part was the timing. I couldn't walk away. Not yet. I needed rest. I needed strength. And I couldn't do it alone. So I stayed. For now. But the air between us changed. Every glance was loaded. Every word carried weight. I no longer saw my husband. I saw a stranger who wore his face. One night, a week later, I caught him looking at me across the dinner table. I was bald, thin, and pale. He looked like he wanted to say something. But instead, he just said, "How was your day?" I answered, "Quiet." But inside, I was screaming. That night, while he slept, I opened his phone. I know, I shouldn't have. But love makes you trust, and betrayal makes you doubt everything. I had to see, had to know. The messages were still there, flirty, intimate, some even sent while I was hooked up to IVs. He'd told her he felt trapped, that he missed feeling alive, that she made him feel seen. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I took screenshots, sent them to myself, then deleted nothing. I walked into the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror, the scarred, tired version of me, and made a promise. You will survive this. Not just the cancer, not just the betrayal, all of it. Part 3, the quiet exit. The hardest part wasn't the cancer. It wasn't the betrayal. It was pretending. Pretending to sleep while he changed in the dark. Pretending his phone didn't vibrate with a message from her during dinner. Pretending I was still the same woman who would fight for this marriage at any cost. But I wasn't. I was done bleeding for someone who watched me suffer and still chose someone else. So I made a plan. Quiet, deliberate, and without drama. I didn't want revenge. I wanted freedom. First, I opened a separate bank account, small deposits at first, then more. Second, I met with a counselor, not just for therapy, but to help rebuild the parts of me that had been hollowed out. She helped me recognize that staying wasn't strength anymore. It was fear. Third, I called my sister, Hannah. I might need a place to crash, I said one night. Her voice didn't hesitate. You don't even have to ask. I started packing little by little, old notebooks, family photos, a sweater I loved that he never noticed. He didn't question it, maybe because he wasn't paying attention, or maybe because he didn't want to face the truth either. Every time he left to run errands, I cleaned out a bit more. I found letters I'd written him during chemo, folded in drawers. He never read them. I knew because they were still sealed. I found one from him, though, written years ago, the night I told him we'd lost our first pregnancy. I don't know how to fix this, he had written, but I'll never stop trying. I stared at the handwriting, remembering that night, the sobs, the way he held me, the way I believed him. He had stopped trying. The day I left was a Tuesday. I waited until he was at work. I called Hannah. She came with a van and her boyfriend. We didn't speak much. I think she knew if she said anything, I'd fall apart. I left a note on the kitchen table. Adam, there was a time I would have walked through fire for you, but I burned, and you didn't even notice. I loved you with every part of me, even the broken parts. But love should never be a place where someone heals alone. I hope you find peace. I'm going to find myself. M. No dramatic goodbye, no final argument, just a quiet exit from a house that no longer felt like home. That night in Hannah's guest room, I cried. Not because I missed him, but because I had finally chosen me. The next morning, I woke up with no texts from him, no calls, just silence. And for the first time in months, that silence didn't feel like a prison. It felt like air. Part 4, the first breath of freedom. It's strange how quiet can feel like both grief and grace. The morning after I left Adam, I woke up before the sun, curled on Hannah's couch beneath a patchwork blanket from our childhood. The world outside her window was still. No clatter of his keys, no coffee brewing, no footsteps upstairs, just my heartbeat, just me. I sat up slowly, surprised by the weightlessness in my chest. Not joy, not yet, but something softer than pain. Relief maybe, or the space where hope could start to grow. Hannah padded into the kitchen, her hair wild, eyes soft. "Tea?" she asked. "Tea," I whispered. We didn't talk much. She didn't ask for details, didn't push. Just handed me a mug and sat beside me, shoulder to shoulder, like when we were little and afraid of thunderstorms. I hadn't realized how much I needed that. Someone who didn't need me to be strong, just present. Later that day, I went for a walk alone. I hadn't walked without purpose in a long time. Not to the hospital, not to the store, not to chase anything, just to move. I noticed things I used to miss. The feel of wind brushing my arms, the way birds sound when you actually listen. I saw a mother and daughter laughing on a park bench, and instead of ache, I felt wonder. What would my life look like now? What could I build from these ashes? I didn't know yet, but for the first time in years, not knowing didn't scare me. A week passed, then another. Adam sent a single text after 4 days. "Where are you?" I stared at it for 10 minutes before deleting it. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't say he was sorry. He just realized the house was quiet and wanted to know where the noise had gone. I never answered. Instead, I began therapy again. This time not to survive a diagnosis or a broken marriage, but to rediscover who I was when I wasn't someone's wife, someone's patient, someone's second priority. I went back to painting, something I'd stopped years ago when life got too busy. My first canvas was a disaster. Muddy colors, chaotic strokes, but I cried when I finished it. Because it was mine. Because it didn't have to be perfect to be real. Hannah watched me hang it on her hallway wall. "You've got fire in you," she said. "You just forgot." I smiled for real that time. Not the practice smile I'd worn for years, but the kind that starts in your bones. I started applying for jobs again. Nothing huge, just something part-time, something mine. I talked to other women in group therapy who had faced betrayal, grief, abandonment, and we laughed. God, we laughed through the pain. I hadn't laughed in so long, I'd forgotten how much it healed. One night I dreamed of my younger self, standing barefoot in a summer field, wild hair and paint on her hands. She didn't speak. She just reached out her arms and held me. I woke up sobbing, not because I was sad, but because for the first time since I left that house, I felt whole again. Not healed, not yet, but whole enough to believe I could be. Part 5. When the ghosts come knocking. Freedom, I learned, doesn't come all at once. It arrives in quiet waves, a choice here, a breath there, and sometimes it falters. It had been almost 3 months since I walked out of that house, out of that life. In that time, I'd started to feel more like a person and less like a wound. My days were slow but honest. I worked part-time at a local gallery, organizing exhibits and greeting visitors. I painted, I wrote letters I never sent. I even started sleeping through the night. But healing isn't a straight line. One rainy afternoon I saw him, Adam. He was standing in the gallery doorway, damp from the drizzle, his hair longer, eyes tired. My breath caught. "I didn't come to make a scene," he said quickly, as if he already knew how much it would cost me just to hear his voice. "Then don't," I replied, more steady than I felt. He looked around the small gallery, then back at me. "I saw your name on the website. I wasn't trying to follow you. I didn't know you worked here." There was a silence between us, but this one wasn't like the ones in our marriage, heavy and toxic. This silence was mine. I chose it. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he said after a while. I looked at him, really looked at him, the man I once loved, the man I once would have died for. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, just diminished, like betrayal had cost him more than he'd expected. "I'm sorry for how I broke us," he said. "I've been in therapy. I'm trying to understand why I raised a hand. "Don't," he blinked. "I don't need your reasons," I said quietly, "and I don't want your guilt. But I deserve peace," I interrupted, "and you don't get to be a part of it." That stopped him. I didn't say it to be cruel. I said it because it was true. He nodded slowly. "I never stopped loving you." "That's the problem," I said. "You think love is enough." I turned and walked into the back room, heart pounding, and waited for the door to chime behind him. It did, a few seconds later, and then it was just me again, shaking but unbroken. Later that night, I sat with Hannah and told her everything. She listened with her usual quiet strength. "You were incredible," she said when I was done. "You said what needed to be said." "I feel like I'm grieving him all over again," I admitted. "You are," she said, "but this time you're doing it for you, not for what you lost, for what you're reclaiming." It hit me then. The difference between pain that traps and pain that frees. The next morning I painted again. But this time I didn't cry. I smiled because I had faced the ghost of my past and didn't crumble. Because my healing wasn't just surviving, it was living. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready for the next chapter. Part 6, The Man with Kind Eyes. It started the way most beautiful things do. Quietly. No fireworks, no dramatic spark, just kindness. I met Lucas at a weekend art fair my gallery participated in. He was a ceramicist, quiet, unassuming, with hands that looked like they belonged to someone who worked with earth and patience. I noticed him before he noticed me. He was helping an older woman carry 3 fragile vases to her car. I don't know what struck me more, the way he held them, like they were precious, or the way he smiled when she said thank you. Later that day, he came by my table. "I love this piece," he said, pointing to one of my smaller paintings, an abstract wave of stormy blues and grays. "It feels like trying to breathe underwater." I looked up surprised. No one had ever described my work like that. "That's exactly what I felt when I painted it." He smiled, and it reached his eyes. We talked for a few minutes, about art, about how hard it is to create from pain and still keep some for yourself, about how healing doesn't come from pretending you're fine. It comes from admitting when you're not. He didn't ask for my number. He didn't flirt. He just said, "I hope I see more of your work," and walked away. And I realized as I watched him go that I wasn't hoping for more of his words. I was hoping for more of his presence. Over the next few weeks, Lucas began showing up more. Always at the gallery, sometimes with a coffee in hand, sometimes just to say hello. He never asked too much, never pushed, just stayed. One afternoon, I was rearranging a new display when I heard his voice behind me. "You're making the whole wall breathe." I laughed. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" He tilted his head, eyes studying the colors. "It's a beautiful thing. Art should feel like lungs." I found myself smiling more around him. Not the forced, polite smiles I'd given for so long, but the kind that stretched all the way through my ribs and into my chest. Still, I was cautious. I wasn't ready. One evening, he invited me to his studio. I hesitated. I'm not looking for anything right now," I said. He nodded. "That's okay. I'm not offering anything, just a cup of tea and maybe a story or two." I went. His studio was small but full of warmth. Clay tools, drying pieces, bits of poetry taped to the wall. There was a calm to the space, a stillness I hadn't felt in a long time. We talked about heartbreak. He told me he'd been married once too, that she left when his world got too quiet for her. That grief doesn't always come from betrayal. Sometimes it just comes from being left behind. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was the only broken one in the room. A few days later, he brought me a gift, a small ceramic bowl glazed in deep ocean blue. "It's got a crack," I said. He nodded. "I made it the week I signed my divorce papers. The crack happened in the kiln. I kept it anyway." I liked how it reminded me that even broken things can still hold something. I took the bowl in my hands, and it felt like it belonged there. "I don't know what this is," I said. "Us, or if there even is an us." Lucas smiled. "Maybe it's just 2 people learning how to hold things again." And that, for now, was enough. Part 7. The letter I never sent. It sat in my drawer for weeks, unopened, unburned, unread. A single envelope with his handwriting, slanted and certain. The return address was still our house, his house now. Lucas didn't ask about it. He saw it once, saw my face change, and never brought it up again. He understood the weight of old wounds, how some letters don't need reading, just releasing. But that morning, crisp, gold-tinged, and quieter than most, I opened it. "To the woman I failed, I don't know how to start this, so I'll just say what I should have said a long time ago. I'm sorry. Not the kind of sorry you say to end an argument, the real kind. The kind that sits heavy in your bones and makes you wish for time machines. I think about us often, the early days before life got complicated, before I got lazy, before I took you for granted. I think about the nights you stayed up waiting for me when I said I was working late. I wasn't. I was avoiding my own guilt. The truth? I didn't cheat because I stopped loving you. I cheated because I stopped loving myself. And I couldn't face the fact that you still believed in me when I had given up on who I was. I wanted to feel seen, desired, important. And instead of turning to the woman who gave me everything, I ran to someone who required nothing. It was cowardly. You once told me that silence can be as loud as a scream. I hear it now. In every quiet morning without you, in every empty drawer where your things used to be, You didn't just leave the house. You took the music, the sunlight, the soft parts of me that only existed because you brought them out. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you found peace. I hope someone looks at you the way you deserve to be seen. I hope you're painting again, smiling, breathing deeply. You were always the brave one. I see that now. M. I read it once, then again. Then I folded it back neatly and slipped it into the drawer. Not because it hurt, not anymore, but because that chapter, in all its chaos, had given birth to the version of me I was starting to love. Later that week, Lucas and I went on a walk through Fort Tryon Park. The trees were amber and fire-colored, the kind of beauty that makes you forget the cold. We didn't hold hands. We didn't need to. I read the letter, I told him softly. He glanced at me. How do you feel? Lighter, I said. Not because he said the right things, but because I don't need them anymore. Lucas nodded. Sometimes closure isn't an ending. It's just a soft landing. We walked a little further, then sat on a bench overlooking the Hudson. Boats moved slowly in the distance. The wind tugged at my scarf. He offered me his gloves without a word. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I was walking towards something better. 1 year later. My art had found new life, a solo exhibition, pieces full of light, shadow, and quiet strength. I called the collection The Echo of Her Voice. People came, critics wrote, but more importantly, I felt proud. One woman stopped me after the gallery opening. Your work. It feels like healing. I smiled. It is. She didn't need to know how many nights I'd cried onto blank canvases, or how long it took to pick up a brush again, or how many times I almost stayed in a life that was shrinking me. I'd walk through the fire and come out painted gold. Part 8. The Woman in the Mirror. There's a mirror in my hallway, antique, with a gilt frame and tiny chips in the edges. It belonged to my grandmother. She used to say, "You can lie to the world, but not to the woman staring back at you." For a long time, I avoided that mirror. After the betrayal, after the tears, after the night I packed a single bag and walked out of my own life. I couldn't bear to look at her, that woman in the reflection. She looked tired, hollow, like she'd been trying so hard to stay composed she forgot how to be. But now, a year and a half later, I don't look away. This morning I stood there longer than usual, toothbrush in hand, bare feet on cool hardwood, my daughter babbling in the next room, and I saw her. Not the version of me who begged a man to come home. Not the woman who whispered apologies for things that weren't her fault. Not the ghost of a wife trying to make silence sound like love. I saw me. Hair longer now. A tiny scar on my collarbone from an accident in the studio. New laugh lines. Eyes that don't flinch when remembering. Not hardened, not bitter, just alive. My daughter is almost 2. She looks like him, the eyes, the dimple. But she laughs like me. Loud, unfiltered, joyful. I never talk about what happened in front of her. But one day when she's old enough, I'll tell her the truth. Not about him, about me, about how I broke and healed. About how loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself. About how strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's getting up quietly and trying again. I'll teach her that if someone ever makes her question her worth, the answer is always, no one decides your value but you. Lucas has never asked for more than I'm ready to give. He loves slowly, gently. The first time he said it out loud, we were on the subway, an express train rattling through the dark. He just looked at me and said, "You don't have to say it back, I just need you to know." That was 6 months ago. And yesterday, I whispered it while he slept. Because healing isn't loud either. It's soft. It's the warmth of choosing someone who never makes you beg to be seen. People still ask me, sometimes in passing, "How did you move on?" And I always smile, because the answer isn't poetic. I didn't. I moved through the nights when I wanted to scream, through the days when everything reminded me of him, through the moments when I doubted whether I'd ever feel whole again. I bled, I burned, I wept, and then I painted, I prayed, I rebuilt, not to prove anything, not to get revenge, not to show anyone I was okay. I did it for the girl who stood in the mirror day after day, waiting for me to come back for her. Tonight, I tucked my daughter in. Lucas kissed her forehead, then stepped back to let me sing. Same lullaby, same soft rhythm. But this time, my voice didn't crack. I wasn't singing from sadness anymore. I was singing from a place of knowing that I'd walked through betrayal and still believed in love, that I'd been discarded and still chose grace, that I'd lost everything and somehow gained myself. Back in the hallway, I passed that old mirror again. I paused just for a moment, and she smiled back. Not because life is perfect, but because I am mine again.